Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. Um, so this is the fourth installment of the Africa Entrepreneurship Forum. It's our last session for the year, and I'm excited for, I think, three reasons. Number one, because yesterday was my birthday. So this is a post-birthday discussion, and I'm super excited to be here with you all to have a post-birthday Africa Entrepreneurship Forum. I am also excited because we are going to be talking about gender equality, a conversation that I think entrepreneurs seldom talk about. They probably talk about it. It's more or less like an afterthought after they have reached their OKRs, objective key results. They now say that, oh, it seems that our team is not balanced. We don't have an equal representation. And after they are trying to raise the funds, and then maybe an investor somewhere or a donor says that, hey, it's like you are not inclusive, your team is not equal. Gender equality seems always to be an afterthought for an entrepreneur. And we believe that entrepreneurs can drive the conversation for an equal workplace where everybody finds themselves belonging to the activities or to the project. Everybody finds an equal playing field for them. And as the words of Tiki, I think I saw it yesterday, that gender equality is a prerequisite to drive change and impact from the business side of things. When you don't have an equal playing field for everyone, there possibly would be some lapses in or some gaps that you might not even see. So we need an equal playing field. We need people to be involved. We need equal understanding to turn. Equity is always the way to go. So I'm excited. And I think the last one is that we are going to be having a conversation with people that are within the field, people that understand the issues. Industry giants in their own way, who have been a part of these conversations for quite some time and are also driving change for an equal workplace, where the fringe benefits, where the opportunities are not just one-sided, but then everybody would find themselves belonging to the growth and the progress of the business. Without much ado, I want to tell you about the African Entrepreneurship Forum. If this is the first time that you're connecting, that you're joining us, we do this forum every quarter. So this is the fourth installment, and this is a forum that is set by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. The purpose of this is to assist you and I as entrepreneurs to be able to find the achievement that we want, to find the skill, and also to grow sustainably, connecting us to the potential investment opportunity, and then facilitating the knowledge that somewhat may not always be within our line of thought or our activities. We want to have you to be a part of the to be aware of the issues that confront us, and then together, drive an equal growth, a wonderful collective impact for Africa's development. So we call it the Africa Entrepreneurship Forum, because entrepreneurs in Africa are doing the hard things, that they want changing everything. So we want to find themselves on a platform like this that they would always connect to, get the knowledge, get the insights, be inspired together, and also find partnerships and various opportunities. So if you're here, let us know where you're connecting from. I'm in Ghana. My name is Andrew Kofi Akotoado. You can call me Andy if the name seems to be a mouthful. Just call me Andy. I'm here with Will, I'm here with Lolo, I'm here with the team from SVI. The founder is also here with us, Tiki. I'm sure she has already sent a message on the chat. She always does that. She often is the first person to post on the chat box. Elvia has done that. Wonderful. And thank you all for joining our conversation for today. It's the last session, and so be excited. And it's Friday, so let's have the Friday energy here, all right? Weekend is just nearby. Okay, without much ado, thank you all for, let us know where you're connecting from. As I said, I'm connecting from Ghana, Accra, Ghana. We have Henry connecting from Lagos. We have Biwi connecting from South Africa. Oh, it's Swatini. We have Imbujini connecting from Swatini. Kylo, South Africa. Oh, welcome everyone. Thank you. So I'm glad to have you here with me. It's not going to be any dull conversation. Trust me, this platform always has an impactful, insightful, exciting conversation that we always have. Right? Wonderful. There you go. Let the team now did not say hello. We're getting all the hellos now. All right. So without much, let me welcome the director for Shared Value Africa Initiative, head of programs, head of sponsorship. She does a lot depending on where you want to connect. And it's like she's like a juggernaut in her field. She drives a lot of impact, and I'm always excited. Her energy, her smile just gets me on another level, man. So thank you all. And Will, over to you. Let us know what you have for us. We're going to talk to us about two things actually. The Purpose Playbook Training 2023, email registration will be going shortly, and I should talk to us about one exciting initiative of the Shared Value Africa Initiative, the Gembi Trade intro and the registration. You should stay with us. Don't miss anything, because everything that we're going to say here or we're going to talk about here is so important for Africa's development. And that includes Gembi Trade. I'm excited about that opportunity, intra-trade, intra-Africa trade conversation, the AFCATA conversations that we ought to have. And so, Will, over to you. Tell us part of the opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And what a lead up to to my few minutes on the stage. I hope I don't disappoint. And again, thank you, Andrew, for just hosting us today. And thank you to everyone for joining us for the 4th of the year African Entrepreneurship Forum. We've been hosting these, as Andrew said. I think now we're wrapping up our 3rd year. So I think for us, always an opportunity to bring our entrepreneurs together across borders to really find various ways to keep you, I want to say, informed, engaged, and hopefully motivated, as we always say. So at the end of this, we also want to hear from you as well, and we'll send you a survey around what would you like to happen as we're talking about next year's forum, in terms of our planning. But as Shared Value Africa Initiative, is always a point of pride for us to always find platforms for entrepreneurs' voices in the various things that we do, including, for example, the Africa Council of 8 that Andrews is part of. Amanda, I know, is here somewhere connecting from Nairobi as well. So really, really great to always find ways to connect with you all. So I'm going to do the thing that I don't like speakers to do, which is share slides. And I didn't even tell the team I was going to do this, but it's really to help keep me on talking points as I talk to, as Andrew mentioned, around a few opportunities that us as SVAI really want to share as we finish the year and share to look forward to for the new year. So as mentioned earlier, we actually launched Gembi Trade as the SVAI when we started working on it early in 2021. And over the last couple of years, we've really been refining what our offering is, and really what Gembi Trade is going to be a curated, connected community of SMEs trading across Africa and beyond. And simply put, it's really a platform that, as we talk about Africa trade, cross-border trade in Africa, we realize that entrepreneurs can fall between the gaps in terms of access to information and being able to make the right decisions for yourself. And us as SVI then came up with the concept and are developing this idea, this solution of creating a community where you not only will be able to learn and get information as entrepreneurs to help you make decisions in cross-border trade, but also connect with others in real time who are going through the same experiences and the same decision-making processes and the same journeys as you are, in order to, again, be better informed, capacitated, and basically all as a community be able to contribute to this growing the African economy. What it's going to look like, of course, is going to be an app. I'm not a technological person. It's going to be an app, but obviously it also will have a web-based mechanism as well, where you can, be able to log in and access information and connect with others. You might know the fact that this is not the first time we've spoken about Gembi Trade to you all on this platform, but we really want to bring it back to you so that you can be reminded of what it is. But now this is also the time for you to join our community, to be among the very first founding members, as we're going to call you for now, who are really part of the journey, who are adapting very early on to the journey and really are able to participate in this as we develop it further. Us as the SVI are currently onboarding, funders as well as partners to join us and make this the best possible platform that we can make it. But we also need you to participate in it to be able to do so. And the matter of signing up for this is really just going to our website, which is jemitrade.africa. You'll get up information just contextually on AFCFTA when you log on and you get on there. But very importantly, there's a sign up page. Go in there, put in your information, and we will also keep you updated as we go through the next steps of developing the platform. And you can also, as mentioned earlier, be one of the early ones to participate in this community with us as the SVAI. So Jemitrade, very important. Community is the word in Swahili, and this is really what we try and what we aim to live up to as the SVAI in the work that you do. We'll share this information also in the chat throughout today's session. And then also, I'm very happy to say this because we have quite a few former cohort members, amongst our speakers today, as well as in our audience today. And really, part of capacity building as the Shared Value Africa initiative through our Shared Value Africa Academy is empowering entrepreneurs on your journey to really, leading with purpose, on your journey to really affecting change in the world, but obviously also doing so while you are building your organizations, while you are contributing to growing the economy. And this for us really is well placed in our shared value training, what we call our purpose playbook training, which speaks to really strategically understanding your power and your purpose, but also aligning your business to that purpose. We call this our purpose playbook training. We've been doing this as well since 2020, and we are currently recruiting for our 5th cohort, which is going to be taking place in the first quarter of 2023. 2023, that's next year. So I think we're going to be sharing more information also in the chat around the criteria that you need to align with to be part of this. But just really, if you want more information, please email Phili, Phili, at shiftimpact.africa. She will share more information. Recruitment is closing at the end of this year, guys. So if you are interested in hearing more, applying and being part of the cohort, you need to be in touch with us. Get into our books, we understand your business, you understand what the training is about, and then we can really finalize our cohort. And I think our former cohort members, those who've trained before, can have a lot to say about the benefits of this training that they were able to be part of. And I think ultimately for us, when you do the training, you also become part of our community of young shared value leaders on the continent. So do get in touch with us about that. And then a final point from my side as well is, 25th of November is going to be the start of 16 Days of Activism, a global movement, a global campaign that really raises awareness around, the importance of, fighting against gender-based violence across the world, as not just business, but society in general. This is an annual thing that happens. Us as SVAI, actually, though, 2 years ago, launched our own campaign called #It'sNotOkay, that not just when these times of the year happen, but throughout the year, we need to constantly keep in mind the value, the importance of fighting gender-based violence, as well as advancing gender equality in our society. So what I wanted to just bring to mind just now as well, that no matter where you are in your own personal capacity as well, or professional capacity, go to our website, itsnotokay.africa, read up a little bit about this and what it means, and think about what it could mean for you in your own context, in your own organization, as a startup, as an enterprise. But also there we have artwork that we always put up on our website that you can download. It costs nothing. You download the artwork, you really raise your voice supporting the fight against gender-based violence, the fight for gender equality. And the artwork is also available in open files as well. So you can also put in your own organizational logo to really be part of this community and really align yourself with #It'sNotOkay. And once that happens, it really is raising awareness and influencing others to really think about their own role. To not just be listening to campaigns, but actually putting your voice towards it and saying something yourself as an entrepreneur towards advancing this fight that we all need to be part of consistently across Africa, right? And within that, then us as SVAI, we are hosting on the 25th, as I mentioned, day one of 60 days of activism. We are convening our third African Universities Gender Equality Forum. And there's a link on the screen where you can register. And this really for us is going to bring to the same virtual room academia and various people who within the academic space have found it upon themselves to do something to advance gender equality, to fight gender-based violence. And I think it just will give you some ideas as to what's possible when you take on the responsibility of knowing better means doing better, and how people have able to, in their own way or other, really come together and do something towards fighting gender-based violence, towards addressing gender equality. So please join us, share that link with everyone also in your networks, and hopefully within that, we can keep growing the conversations that we are going to be having as a community. We can keep advancing the fight, but also keep others in mind, keep others, I want to say, accountable for the role that they also have to play within this. So for me, what's exciting about this conversation today is really hearing from our speakers and panelists around what their perspectives are, what their experiences are, even challenges are within this space, within this very important topic that we are addressing today. And I think what I want to do, as I said earlier, is, we always record the sessions, we always share recordings of the sessions, for you to also share with others that might have missed out, that you want to be part of this, or rather listen to it later. But now share the link. Let's come together, guys, and let's bring the Fire Friday energy, like Andrew said, and let's, get the conversation going. Thank you so much, Andrew. It's back to you.
Thank you so much, Vio. Let's bring the firepower. Let's bring the fire in us. I always say that when it comes to some conversations, sometimes people need to be inspired. And today is going to be inspired to actually be a part of it. Getting involved in something is not just, it comes from somewhere. You need to actually find the knowledge, understand that these are very critical issues, and then be inspired by someone's story, someone's assessment of the issue. And then before you realize you are involved in it, you are part of it. And it starts very small. It starts by you being a bit intentional. Intentional, this is important. I like the word intentionality a lot. And thank you, Vio, for those wonderful presentations. And these are all opportunities that a shared value is offering, including the African Entrepreneurship Forum, purpose playbook training, Trade, the It's Not Okay movement, and then working with the African University actually for gender equality, gender-based violence advocacy. These are all part of the issues that are confronting our continent. And I'm very excited. I always get inspired when I see SVAI, the team, driving this wonderful initiatives for an inclusive, a fair, an impactful, wonderful continent, as we all want to actually have it to be. And so with this said, we are moving into the heart of the forum now. And we always start the forum with a keynote. We always start the conversation with a keynote, someone who will set the tone and give us that perspective that we need to drive the conversation through that line of thought. And so we have an amazing woman who has worked in several big brands, corporates. She has years of experience in coaching. She's very good in facilitating programs like this, and she's a renowned speaker already. She's based in South Africa. She goes by the name Impome Nkombe Daka. I had to pronounce the name very fast because I don't. But it's amazing. I would love to hear more from her. She's the founder and CEO of About Change Conversation. I told you she's been having this conversation, and she's driving an initiative for About Change Conversation. How inspiring the word is, the phrase of, and it happens to be the name of the company, About Change Conversations. I'd love to hear more from her about the issue of entrepreneurs, whether they can drive gender equality and inclusion. This is what she's going to be talking about. And I want you to, get all excited just as I am and pay attention. Let's listen to her and be a part of these conversations that she has been having about change. All right, over to you, Impome. Glad to have you with us today. We're excited and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrews. I just want to say thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. And oh yeah, and happy birthday, Andrews. Happy birthday. Wishing you well in your life and blessings over your life.
Wow.
Thank you.
You're amazing. You've just blown me away already. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm really excited to have been invited. I was not aware of Shared Value Africa Initiative and the work that is being done. But I really want to say that what I've seen is an amazing platform for entrepreneurs. And I really want to say, well done to Shared Value Africa Initiative. I think they're doing amazing work. Personally, I enjoy working with entrepreneurs and with just individual people and organizations around their careers as well as their businesses. So I really enjoy being part of conversations that can impact people's lives. Hence, the business is called About Change Conversations. I really love to engage people in topics that we might not usually talk about. And that's what actually drives me, because then I know that somebody will be impacted in some shape, way, or form. And I always say, even if there's one life that is impacted, I've done my work, and that for me is very fulfilling. So thank you for having me. So I was asked to talk briefly about the fact that entrepreneurs can drive gender equality and inclusion. And I've added another word in there, which is also diversity. So what I'm saying is entrepreneurs can drive gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. And as entrepreneurs, we are about creating organizations. So no matter how small or big our visions are, but it's about creating an organization that you are building as an entrepreneur. We are all about creating value and being competitive in our different industries. So as Andrews has mentioned, this is a topic that we don't usually just engage with. It is expected out of big corporates, but as entrepreneurs, it's not a conversation that we usually engage with. But before we get into it, I'm an academic at heart, so sometimes I like to define things. So if we look at definitions, gender equality is defined by the United Nations as a human right. Gender equality is also one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as a number 5, which talks to achieving gender equality and empower all women and girls. The reality is that women and girls represent half of the world's population and therefore also half of its potential. But today, gender inequality persists everywhere and it actually stagnates social progress. So women continue to be underrepresented and mainly in leadership, whether in corporate, in politics, or in business in general. When we talk about diversity, diversity covers a broad spectrum of different aspects. But in the context of our conversation today, I would like to focus on gender, race, as well as culture. So Donnelly, who used to be Global Diversity Officer at EY, defines inclusion in the workplace as a collaborative, supportive, and respectful environment that increases the participation and contribution of all employees. True inclusion is supposed to remove all barriers, discrimination, and intolerance. And when true inclusion is applied properly in the workplace, it is natural for everyone to feel included and supported. So what does this mean? It means diversity and inclusion have to be part of the company's mission, strategy, and practices because it contributes to the competitive business advantage. Companies that create diverse and inclusion work environments are more adaptable, and creative and become magnets that attract top talent. And I've seen this a lot in corporate, mainly with the millennials and the Gen Z, where they will be saying, if the company does not stand for gender equality, diversity and inclusion, they are actually not prepared to work for that particular company. So we really need to think about these things. Research has shown that empowering women as employees and consumers contributes better to business and economic outcomes through increased productivity, profitability, and company effectiveness. The World Bank also has stated that productivity per worker could rise up to 40% by eliminating all forms of discrimination against female workers or managers. 40% is actually quite a high percentage. So if we reach gender equality, what that means is that we will add $12 trillion to the global economy as the workforce begins to reach its full potential. This directly impacts the private sector success by, number one, the emergence of a bigger marketplace to sell goods and services, and number two, by lifting millions out of poverty, especially women and girls. So it is impossible to overstate the value of cultural variety in the workplace. The bottom line improves when a diverse workforce is present. Businesses with transparent diversity and inclusion policy that really uphold the policy have happier and more productive staff, as well as positive reputation. So the business bottom line benefits from diversity and inclusion in the workplace, which also enhances a company's culture and working conditions. So you can raise the general level of satisfaction within the organization by making sure that everyone, regardless of gender, is treated fairly. Workplace involvement comes down to a fundamental human science, the inclusion situation that celebrates and facilitates worker cooperation, creates equal opportunities for employees who need to share their information and experience with the team. A cooperation that puts an emphasis on workforce diversity yields employees that are encouraged to adopt more responsibility. Maybe the biggest question in your mind is, so what does this mean for all of us as entrepreneurs? This means we need to be intentional about gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. As I said earlier, it needs to be part of our business vision. It needs to be part of our mission. It needs to be part of our strategy and practices. So how does this play out in reality? We can talk about the theory, but in reality, how does this play out? So what this means is it means that we need to embed these elements that we're talking about into the culture of the businesses that we're building. If you have been in business for a while and this was not part of your strategy, it is never too late to actually change and embed this as part of your growth strategy. We have to be intentional about the people that we want to employ and be conscious of our own biases of wanting to work with people of our gender, of wanting to work with people of our own race. So sometimes as human beings, we want to work with our own kind. And when we are pushed to work with people that are different to us, then we either don't treat them well, we don't listen to their opinions and contributions, we think of them less, and we don't pay them what they deserve. So these are all the other elements that we really need to take into account as we are having a conversation around gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. In the workplace, we know that it is the majority of women that bear the brunt of the things that I've mentioned, where you are either not treated well, where your opinions and ideas are not being taken seriously, where you're not being paid as equal as your other counterparts just because you are a woman. So as entrepreneurs, we need to be conscious about not giving women opportunities and discriminating against them just because they are women. Other elements that also contribute to this conversation, either treating people with disabilities differently. So there's a whole lot of other layers that actually also come into being when we're having this conversation. So as entrepreneurs, we need to be conscious about not giving women opportunities, discriminating against them just because they are women. What we usually find mainly in corporate is that there is a high percentage of women in the lower levels, but not in the leadership. So as we build our businesses, how do we consciously decide that we take into account these elements so that we are competitive, so that we can contribute to the bottom line of our businesses? So I'm just going to share a few ideas and I'll come to a close. So number one, it is always easy to pay lip service to a number of things, but not have these things being operationalized in our businesses. So as business owners, as leaders, you need to be able to make sure that it is a priority. Gender equality and inclusivity becomes a priority in the business. You don't just speak about it, it is practiced and it is also measured. So have policies in place that support this and make sure that those policies are adhered to. And if you do not adhere to the policy, what is the consequence of that? So that's number one, and something that we need to consider and think about. Number two, you ideally want to employ personnel or staff whose underlying principles also align with this value. So when you're interviewing people or you want to bring people into your business or your organization, make sure ideally they align with these values. Because sometimes it makes it very difficult to have leadership that you've brought in that actually doesn't buy into the values. Because having to then change that person really takes a lot. And you want people to be, you want this to be part of your culture, and you want to ingrain it into the DNA of the business that you're building. Number three, you also want to be clear on what inclusive behavior or equality looks like. So everybody needs to understand what that means so that there's no confusion and there are no different interpretations or perspectives of what this actually looks like in practice. Number four, we also want to have unconscious bias conversations in our businesses. All of us have got biases, and we need to be true to that. And we need to be true to those conversations. And when those things are being raised, you need to then be able to have an open mind to realize that you might have a bias that you're not actually even aware of, because it is a bias anyway. So the unconscious bias conversations in the business are very important. And sometimes you need to formally introduce unconscious bias training, And this needs to be done frequently, and this needs to be done consistently. Number 5, you also want to have conversations around equal pay. Equal pay, looking into account to the gender and to race. Gender and race should not be part of this conversation. Equal pay is equal pay, and the market value should be the conversation, not the fact of the gender and not the conversation around race. That's what we need to focus on. You also need to consciously promote an equal number of women and men in order to achieve gender equality. According to statistics, a lot of women, as I've mentioned, have managerial and supervisory positions. But in contrast, there are fewer women working in high levels in different organizations. So as entrepreneurs, as we are building our own organizations, how are we making sure that we've got a balance between the women and the men that are working for us? And from a diversity perspective, when you've got diverse teams contribute to different perspective, to different ideas, and there's better collaboration in the workplace when you've got diverse teams. There are nuances that everybody brings into an idea. So let's make an example. You have a team of men that are working on a brand, and they do, maybe that brand is even targeting women. There are nuances that you are going to miss in that conversation because they don't know what they don't know. So how do we make sure that we've got good representation, either from a gender perspective, from a race perspective, cultural perspective as well in the businesses that we're building? As I end, as entrepreneurs, it is important to think about how we can play our part and how we can be part of the solution. Also realizing that we also have a lot to benefit as well. When we have gender equality, when we have diversity, when we have inclusion, we know that our businesses will have better business operations. They will be diverse in thinking, which will also contribute to our bottom line. Thank you for the time and look forward to the rest of the conversation on this topic. Thanks, Andrews.
Thank you, Hove. There are a lot of pointers that we would actually, expand on during our discussion, our panel discussion. But then there's one question. I'm sure you've already answered a question on the chat box. I mean, in terms of the balance between men and male and female workforce and all that, the context of this conversation. And so moving on, there's this thing that you touch on unconscious biases. When it comes to our culture, our race, and then also gender, some people will say that they're more comfortable working with women, they're more comfortable. I mean, there are some founders that I have met, entrepreneurs that I've met that say that, hey, they're comfortable working with, their male counterparts compared to female counterpart. That issue of comfort and all that, how would you, because you've already shared with us the underlying issue on the productivity level that comes when businesses are actually including women or finding that balance between both genders within their workplace. We know the 40% increase in productivity aspect, broadband, and all that. But then you can see that there is that intrinsic thing when it comes to the personality types, when it comes to the persona of both genders. They find themselves being comfortable with their male, their more comfortable gender that they want to work with. How do we address those issues? We might not touch all, we might not be able to answer all, maybe we'll go into the discussion and then we'll expand on this again. But just a quick highlight there would be.
Yeah, thanks, Andrews, for the question. I think for me, it's all about pushing ourselves into opening ourselves up to want to work with other genders or with other people from different races, because as we say, there's a broad spectrum, because those people bring different thinking into the room. Other people bring different perspectives. So if you want to be
is it my internet? I think we're having a bit of internet challenges. So
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you very well. Loud and clear.
that's what I think we're getting here now.
Oh, okay. I lost my train of thought. What I was saying was, so most of us are stuck because it's easier to work with the same gender. But I think we need to push ourselves into the uncomfortable space of trying to work with other genders, other races, other beliefs, other cultures, because what that does, it challenges us to really be open, to open ourselves up to exploring other things that we might not know. Different people bring different elements into business, into ideas, into innovation. So you want to push yourself, you want to get other people's ideas, because sometimes when it's the same gender, the thinking sometimes is more or less the same. So you want to open yourself up, because that pushes you to be able to get other ideas, other perspectives, and different way of doing things. Other cultures will bring you different ways of thinking, and nuances that you wouldn't only know what you know, and other people bring that into the space.
Wonderful. Moving the needle, going outside of your comfort zone a bit to find, diversity. That's the issue of diversity and inclusion. If you really want to drive change in your business.
And
Thank you so much, Mpumi.
Yeah. Another thing just to add on is that inclusion part, because sometimes we talk about inclusion, but it's about hearing what other people are saying.
Exactly.
It's about when people speak, you hear them and you don't take lip service in those type of conversations, because that's where the change happens.
Wonderful. Listening, hearing them, and involving their perspectives. That's where the change happens. Thank you so much for that. It's getting exciting. I see a lot of comments in the chat, but we'll touch base on that shortly. But let's move to our next speaker for the day. He's actually someone that is super amazing with the work that he's doing for inclusive STEM in India. Is by the name Shakul Sonkar. He's the founder of Inclusive STEM, where they actually work with the people that are, sometimes we think about them after we had actually designed our products and services. And then now we tend to say that, oh, is this actually accessible to our disabled or specially abled community? But then he is coming from a place where you have to include the accessibility issue, integrate those underlying or serve those underlying measures within your product, that it can actually serve every community, every user group. Not that you come and then later probably come and say that, oh, it's unfortunate our product is not good for the blind, for an instance, or cannot, but then you actually find those underlying issues sorted out before you launch. We're going to hear more on this from our speaker, Shakul Sonkar. Are you here with us? Can you hear me? And if Shakul is here, awesome. There you go, Shakul. And so Shakul is going to talk to us about inclusivity. I mean, the importance of access to all in tech. Shakul, over to you.
Thanks so much, Andrews. I'm really glad to be here. Thanks so much for the entire SVAI team for giving me this opportunity to speak at this forum, and also to touch upon the very important topic, as our keynote speaker has already covered most of what I actually wanted to start with. So she had, in a way, made my job really easier. But as Andrews mentioned, that when we talk about inclusion, diversity, and accessibility, it does not limit itself to only gender inclusion or people with linguistic disinclusion and so on and so forth, but it also includes the most neglected people in our society, and which is fortunately or unfortunately, world's largest minority, which is people with disabilities. So according to UN, we have about 1 billion people who have some sort of disabilities. It could be intellectual disabilities or vision impairment or hearing impairment, locomotor disabilities, so like anything and everything. And what we do in our day-to-day life is basically make things difficult for them to live a better life. So basically, I want to cover 4 key themes in my talk today. Starting with just throwing some more light on inclusion and diversity, then going into the background of what we do at iSTEM, why we started it, and what actually motivated and inspired us to start what we are doing today. Then talk about our work, the impact that we've been able to create in the ecosystem, and then to leave you with a small note on the intersectionality of gender and disabilities. Talking about inclusion as our keynote speaker mentioned, I mean, it's basically creating a society which is more inclusive in nature, basically include everyone and anyone regardless of their race, gender, color, disabilities, and anything and everything, right? But in order to understand what inclusion is, we need to really understand what are the things that we do in our day-to-day life that exclude certain amount of people. And I'll try to explain this with a couple of examples. So imagine if you have a public building, right? And this building has no elevators or escalator, the automated staircases, and someone with wheelchair or someone who uses wheelchair tries to access this building, this becomes almost impossible for them to go on the higher floors of that building, right? Similarly, imagine you are an entrepreneur, you have a website, a very fancy looking website, with a lot of graphics, images, and so on and so forth. And someone who could have been your customer, and imagine if they are blind, because blind people cannot see your images, your fancy decoration and stuff. Imagine if you do not give a textual description of those images, then those things become inaccessible. And this is a lack of information at their part. So what we really call the information famine in our world, where you do have a lot of information, but it is not accessible, usable for everyone in the society. So this is what we are trying to do, to create information which is accessible, to help people to create more diverse culture, and to provide them the kind of opportunity. As we have already discussed that what kind of impact we can have when we have diverse teams in our official setup or work culture. And I'll give you some examples. So back in 2018, we at iSTEM actually have started something called an inclusive hackathon. So those who do not have a technical background, a hackathon basically is a 24 to 48 hours long coding competition where people are, given some problem statement, or they choose a problem statement and they have to code together and develop a prototype. They form a team of 5 or 6 people or even more, and they work on those solutions and they develop a prototype or a minimum viable product in those 24 hours. But the difference between this hackathon and any other hackathon that has been conducted throughout the globe is that we invited people with and without disabilities in the same team, specifically women with disabilities, people with disabilities, and people without disabilities, women without disabilities, and people coming from different culture. Because I come from India, which is where we believe in diversity and equity, right? Because it's a huge country, people having different culture. So the idea really is that come up with a team which is basically very diverse in nature. And what we observed in those hackathons since 2018 that we have been doing, that when people develop those products are better equipped to include more and more people. They actually solve problems of more people. For example, if you have a team comprising of women and someone who is blind, they kind of bring in their own perspective, right? That, if you are developing a mobile app or something or the other, how can you incorporate those things which can be usable for them as well as an end user? So it is very important for us to understand those kind of things, which we, as we discussed, that they don't know what they don't know, right? So there are so many things that they wouldn't even have encountered in their life. So hearing those different opinions within your team, having those people in your team actually helps a lot. It is a proven fact that when you have a diverse team, you tend to develop a product which is more usable, accessible, and inclusive, and tends to generate more sales for you. So basically, it's a win-win situation for us also, because now we are developing a product which can be used by more people, hence it can give us more revenue, more money, and makes our business sustainable. So talking about this, I just briefly want to touch upon why we started what we now call I Stand Here in India. So this actually starts back in 2013 when, like any other teenager, I was a young kid, right? And in India, it happens that after grade 10th, in grade 11th, you have to choose your stream for studies. You can either opt for science stream, where you can study medical or non-medical, like engineering and stuff. You can opt for commerce, where you study a lot of accounts and business and economics and all those, or you study humanities, where you study social sciences, political sciences, history, and so on and so forth. So the norm really was in India that blind people can only opt for humanities and no other stream in their 11th standard in the school. So the challenge for me was, because I am blind and I wanted to study medical, non-medical sciences, like physics, chemistry, and mathematics. And that time it was not even there. There was no act that would allow me to do that. So the fight went on, fight with my school. I had to change my school, and then ended up taking sciences, and the kind of struggle. Same problem I saw when I was going to the universities, because I wanted to study mathematics, which is absolutely non-common in the developing country like India for someone to study mathematics, right? So all the colleges, even though I was clearing their entrance examinations, I was falling in the cutoff list that they have for students, they were hesitant, and most of them have neglected me to give an enrollment. Luckily, I got into a university, completed my education, and ended up being a first blind student in India who graduated with a degree in mathematics. But the problem again comes up, and the problem is employment. Like, okay, somehow you studied, you dealt with all those challenges in your student life, but what about your employment? And people are hesitant because they've never seen people with disabilities working on the same scale, working on the same potential as they do, right? As we briefly discussed, because you tend to think and form an opinion against someone who does not look like you, or who are slightly different than you are. So the same problem, blockage of employment. And this is when this idea of I Stand came into our mind. We thought, we wanted to raise awareness around disability, disability and gender inclusion, and how can we employ more and more people with disabilities in different corporate sectors. How can we raise awareness around it? How can we sensitize people that these are the needs, and there are technologies that can really help people with disabilities? And this is when we actually started off organizing this hackathon that I briefly mentioned to you, because we wanted to generate that kind of empathy from the non-disabled community. Like the idea really that people with disability can actually work on a same scale just like you. It's just that they might work slightly differently the way that you do in your day-to-day life. For example, you as a person without disability work on your laptop by looking at it, and I as a blind person install another software which is called a screen reader that reads the information displayed on my screen, and I adhere to that information and work on an equal space with equal speed and with the same kind of efficiency, right? And this is the kind of message that we wanted to drew within the society that people should know about all of this. So once I graduated in 2019, we thought, the sensitization and the hackathons and the mentorship program that we have been running, it's really good. But if we really wanted to create an impact and scale it, we need to use our own technical skills and develop some technology around it. And the biggest gap that we observed is lack of accessible information for people with disabilities. Just to give you an idea, 98% of the top 1 million visited pages are inaccessible for people with disabilities. So just imagine if you have top 1 million pages, 98% of them, basically 980,000 of them are inaccessible for people with disabilities. So when COVID happened, then it was a lack of information, government circulars, all sorts of information was rolling around, and people with disability were the most vulnerable group within the country without any information, just because of lack of accessible content that can be produced, that could be accessed by them. There are inaccessible websites, inaccessible digital content, inaccessible mobile app, inaccessible softwares that they can use. Even the app that government developed to register for the vaccine was itself inaccessible. So people with disabilities were often took someone else's help to register for the vaccination. So this is where we came into the picture, and we thought, what, we really want to develop a technology that can help include accessibility in the development life cycle. Just like when you develop any mobile app or software or a website, the way you think about security, the way you think about any other thing, why don't you think the same about accessibility? Because you tend to forget people with disabilities, right? And this is when we started developing our solutions, which can help these organizations, governments, corporates, universities, and schools to make, one, their content accessible for people with disabilities, second, their website and their entire digital infrastructure accessible for people with disabilities. I'm glad to share, we recently launched our product in March, our mobile app and the software that we have developed. And right now we see more than 5,000 people with disabilities using our product and being benefiting to them. We have worked for United Nations Population Fund. We have worked for one of the leading universities here in the country, and we are also working in the state government of Washington in the United States. The kind of impact that we've been delivered, the kind of smile that we see on the face of people with disabilities when they are able to access information on an equal basis like anyone else. It's basically equipping everyone and anyone with the same kind of information that others have access, but you don't have. So once one says that, you are not disabled, but the society is designed in a manner that makes you disabled, because the information has been produced in a manner that cannot be accessed by you not because of your disability, because the way it has been produced. So the idea really was to give everyone an equal playing field, to access information, to receive information, and the idea was to get equal education and end up getting a dignified life and get a dignified life within proper employment and those kind of stuff. Now, I'd like to end, since I've been discussing about disability and inclusion. When you see this entire pyramid of the society, the bottommost layer would be comprising of women with disabilities. And this is where gender and disabilities play hand to hand, right? Because it's an intersectionality of gender and disability, because women with disabilities are even more vulnerable, excluded, and not given opportunity. They receive less education than men with disabilities. They are less employed. They are not treated equally. They are not treated equally at home. Imagine a blind girl. They are not even sent to school because their parents are afraid that, what if something happens wrong with my girl child, what I will do.
Yeah.
And we live in a society where, girls' dignity come with also all those other types of things that we all know about, right?
Yeah.
It is very difficult to convince their parents and get them to their school, so they receive least number of education. So what we knew this problem exists in society, but we need to take. It's good to discuss about all this, but what about in the election? So we actually launched a special program for women with disabilities, where we basically curated a list of a new mentorship program, where if you are women who have any types of disability, regardless, and you come from anywhere and everywhere within the country or even outside the country, if you need any kind of support, we will help you connect with the right mentor who can help you guide in your personal or professional life. And we have seen such great impact of these mentorship sessions. We curated some courses, right? Upskilling courses, for example, for women with disabilities, where we can take those courses. And I'm glad to share that one of our recent student got into the Meta after taking our courses in the US. So it's basically not about India, Africa, and anywhere in the globe. The situation remains same, because India has only 16% people with disabilities employed. US has 19.1. So it's not a huge difference that we see in the developed and the developing world, right? It's just that we need to work together to include everyone and really try to understand the problem and try to accept that, the problem exists and how can we include the people. And you will be surprised to see, when given an opportunity and stage, people are just fantastic.
Exactly.
So yeah, with this, I'd like to conclude my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions.
Wonderful, Shakur. I think that the issue is so important, and you have a plethora of information giving us the dynamics with the huge, gaps when it comes to inclusion for women with disability, for persons with disability, and then looking at the diversity issue with the product, with the offering, with the services, the accessibility, and then having them to be part of the usage of those services. Because after all, there are a few concerns that are already, from Jackie. That's a main issue on the chat board. Disability access is a big problem, even for buildings. Sometimes accessing some state facilities, some buildings, it's quite difficult, and it's very disheartening when you find yourself as someone who is from the impact side and trying to provide offerings that bring people along, that leaves no one behind. And you see that there are some services that just are not equitably distributed, or the usage are not so inspiring. 19.5 or 6% of the population in the US, persons with disability population, are employed in the US of all places. And that's a very huge issue. I will be talking more about this in our panel discussion. I want to say thank you so much for the presentation and for this particular material moment. I encourage everyone to stay with us, because we are moving into the heart of the conversation, where we would bring all the thoughts shared by Mpome, our first keynote speaker, and the thoughts shared by Shakur, and then expand on it with my wonderful panel that we've gathered, that the SVR has gathered here today. And so if you are just joining us, there's an African Entrepreneurship Forum. We can send a tweet, invite someone to join us, that the conversation is getting exciting. We're talking about gender equality. This is something that entrepreneurs hardly talk about. They hardly, seldom, they sometimes don't even talk about it at all. But then we want to inspire entrepreneurs like you and I to begin to talk about these issues. And so we've gathered, as I said, brilliant minds who are going to expand on this. We have our keynote speaker who will be joining us on the panel. We hope she's still with us. Shakur will also join us on the panel. And then let me introduce those that have not yet spoken. If they're here with us, kindly turn on your videos, our speakers. If you're here with us, turn on your videos, and then other people also know you. So the first on my list to introduce, as I said, we've already heard from the keynote, Mpome, who is going to join us, the founder and CEO of About Change Conversations, Shakur Sonka, co-founder of Inclusive STEM. Then we have Tumi Mabichela, who is also the founder and CEO of Impolo mobile health in South Africa. She's also doing an amazing thing also in the space of diversification and then inclusion from the mobile health service sector in South Africa. And then we have Lungi. Lungi is a brown thinker, brown strategist. She helps build purposeful brands with border frontier in South Africa. And she's also part of the SVI family, the team. We have Nicodemus, my brother from Kenya, Nairobi, who is also doing wonderful, amazing work within the food security sector with Food Solidarity International. He's a founder of Food Solidarity International. So we have them here with us. Amazing. You see them on the screen, right? Wonderful people. We're going to talk about the conversation. With the first thing on my mind, I mean, just because Shakul just ended the conversation with more or less like something that is, it's more or less like an appeal. There's an emotional side of it. You can feel, you sense that there's that emotional side of the thing that, hey, guys, we are probably perhaps not really driving inclusive growth on our continent. The continent has huge number of disabled communities. When it comes to the issue of diversification and inclusion, talking about gender equality, there are issues of language, there are issues of, as Mpombe said, unconscious biases. Who would actually be very conscious about employing or working with a person, a visually impaired person, who would actually think of that within their strategies that, hey, guys, let's build an inclusive team. I mean, I don't know. Let me start off with Tumi, with your experience within the space of mobile health and then working with other businesses, other entrepreneurs. How often do this conversation come within your line of work, and what are your general observation or views about these things based on what we've already shared, I mean, from our keynote speaker, as a way of just taking off? I'll also hear from Nicodemo, because I know you are all listening, and then Lungi, you're all listening to the insights and the presentation and perspectives from our speakers. Just quick observation, quick reflections based on what you've shared, connecting with your work, and then let's kick off from there.
Okay, thanks, Andrews, and good afternoon to everyone who's joined us. So Bilo Mobile Healthcare Services provides primary healthcare services via mobile pop-up clinics to underserved communities in urban, semi-urban, and rural areas. And we're a social enterprise that's based on a business model and on shared value initiative partnerships. And the observation that I've made is even on the provision of healthcare services in itself, in the public sector, knowing very well that about 98% of South Africans are dependent on public healthcare infrastructure. Those services in themselves are not inclusive. There is an unconscious bias within the provision of the services themselves. So you will find within a rural community, just to give you an example and contextualize my comment, where you do not have access to cervical cancer testing, or even breast cancer examination, or even the teaching and education and awareness of self-examination. So does that mean people who are in rural settings are not susceptible to cancer? Are they not prone to getting cancer? Will they not get? Why do we not have the services? Just because they're in a rural setting? Because everything is concentrated among metropolitan areas. And to reflect on something Mpombe has said as well, that naturally you want to employ people of your own kind or that look like you. So that unconscious bias is there even in the nursing fraternity, where the majority of women are nurses. And yet the sector is open to males as well. Why can we not have more male nurses or even community health workers? So it's, until such time that we are conscious about it as entrepreneurs, we are not going to be part of the solution. So people like myself should be very intentional about employing males to become healthcare practitioners or medical healthcare providers as well. So if I can just keep it here, Andrew, and give over to Nicodemus.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Nicodemus, quick reflections from your end. Food Solidarity International. I don't know when it comes to agriculture and food issues, how it is for you, because I know there are a lot of women farmers. You know, in most African countries, there are a lot of female farmers, but then perhaps the issue of diversity and inclusion when it comes to the disabled community, and then with reflections on unconscious biases and the culture, and then also, the race and all that. How do those issues also confront you, or perhaps your work that you do with your observation, your reflections, just as Tumi has highlighted from her end?
Thank you so much, Andrews. It's a pleasure being here with all of you to speak on these very delicate and important issues of our day. So food solidarity, simply put, works to reduce food loss and food waste, yeah, given that we have global goals, or given that we have global ambitions of wanting to have food security, wanting to reduce hunger and malnutrition and all of this. So there is no conversation around food security, there is no conversation around zero hunger without a proper conversation around reducing food loss and food waste. So that is what FSI, or food solidarity, seeks to achieve or work towards, right? When talking about inequalities, the agriculture industry is one of the places where, the food and agriculture industry is one of the places where there are so many inequalities, so many disinclusion, a lot of injustices, because usually I like to give an analogy that if you think of the idea of a knife, yeah, a knife is a very simple tool. You can use it to chop vegetables, and you can also use it to bring harm to somebody, right? And that is the kind of state we are in right now. Food is something that is supposed to bring us joy, bring us together, nourish ourselves as human beings, because we primarily function on food, right? But right now, where we are and where we have been over the decades, food is something that has been weaponized. It is something that has been used to bring so much injustice to everyone. And 9 times out of 10, women are more negatively impacted by the injustices in food industry or agriculture industry as compared to men. Just as Shakul was speaking, and I'm speaking on my own self in this, that I think I've been taking some things for granted, just from my own perspective. Sometimes you feel you can wake up and walk and run. You don't tend to think about what is another person going through. So that was a very an eye-opening conversation that, or rather, talk that Shakul gave, to be able to just step out of your comfort zone. And we have talked about this. Step out of your comfort zone and think, okay, fine. If how is somebody else that is not me? I am sitting here. I have this. I'm doing this. I'm capable of this. Standing, walking, running, seeing, touching, feeling, and all of this. How is someone else who is not able to experience this thing? How are they experiencing life, right? And the moment we begin to be intentional about asking ourselves, introspecting about these things, that is now the time we're able to have meaningful change, meaningful conversations around what could be, the possibilities of what could be. Just to wrap up my first observation, is that in the food and agriculture industry, there are a lot of injustices, mostly felt by women, but at the same time, there are a lot of programs that are geared towards reducing, these injustices or inequalities, right? But the question is, why don't we have the level of change that we desire to have? If, for example, from the time I was growing up, the idea of empowering a girl child has been on the table ever since, right? But right now, we are still having these conversations just as much as ever. So then the question becomes not what is being done to address these things, but why are they not working? Or if they're working, why are they not working at the level that we want them to work, right? So for me, the answer becomes, it's not just about addressing the symptoms of some of these inequalities or injustices, but it's about addressing the root cause, right? It's about seeing at the big picture, okay, fine, why are there so many barriers to women's occupying spaces, or occupying, being more in leadership spaces. Until we are able to address such issues from the root up, then the conversation around just addressing the symptoms will keep on making us to be going in circles or employing programs that not necessarily have the impact that we desire them to have. Thank you so much, Andres.
Yeah, thank you so much for those final thoughts, Nicodemus, because we are going to actually zoom into it, right? We're going to hone further on those angles. But quick one, Lungi, what are your quick observations or reflections so far?
Thanks, Andrews. So I'm Lungi with Border Frontier, and really from what I've listened with our keynote speakers, as well as some thoughts from our panelists, I think it comes down to a conversation of really understanding that as entrepreneurs, as small business owners, no matter how big you are, whether you're a company of one or you're a company of many, this is a conversation that needs to start taking shape at a foundational level. So from the minute that you are actually at an early startup stage, the discussion around inequality, the discussion around representation is something that we need to factor in. So I'm from a brand thinking point of view, and brand is essentially customer experience, it's reputational perception, and then it is also about the design experience, the way that we put together products and services so that they are speaking to how we address these challenges in terms of representation and equality. But I think that ultimately we always have to, as entrepreneurs and as business owners, think about how are we bringing these issues to light and how are we helping to tackle these challenges from the way that we grow visibility with our businesses. How are we thinking about this when we are starting to think about amplifying or scaling up our businesses? Do we really think about how the question of impact and inclusive impact comes in there? So when you're really thinking about scaling your business, it's important that we are looking at inclusive pathways to do that. And then lastly, also, I would think that in terms of catalyzing innovation, because for me, I think that as soon as you scratch the surface of gender inequality, very soon you realize that it's not a gender issue, it's a representation issue. Because, Mbume as well as Shakul alluded to the question of intersectionality, right? That women with disabilities have got even more challenges than those who are just not really having to battle with issues of access from an able-bodied point of view. So I think that's something that we need to bear in mind as entrepreneurs. So in your communications as a brand, in how you want to be made visible, are you thinking about inclusivity in how you are designing and innovating with your products and services? Are you thinking about representation? And I think we've seen that with big corporates, with big brands, where there's been a lot of pushback, even in terms of publicity and their brand reputation, that when you don't have people at the table who are representative of the society that you are trying to serve, of the communities that you are operating in, you are going to miss something because those nuances are there. So it is important to have a diversity of perspectives, a plurality of voices, and then of course that representation across the board, gender, sexual orientation, religion, race, etc. So we don't just stop at gender equality, but I think once we scratch that, we realize that it deepens even more to become an issue around inclusion and representation. So I would encourage, business owners to really think about that, and don't think about it only when you are at the stage where you feel you are scaling up and you're more established. Begin to build in that thinking at a very early stage as well.
Wonderful, Lungi. I'm connecting this thoughts with that of Nicodemus' concern that we seem to be addressing the symptoms of the issues now, but then underlining, root causes that if, as we made mention of, if the entrepreneur does not start with those mindset, those knowledge, those understanding, it would become an afterthought. that you will now begin to design some sort of inclusive strategies, adopting some brand methods or brand thinking to just project yourself as some organization, as an organization that's actually driving maybe SDG 5, gender equal. As you begin to think about it, oh, let me include SDGs, the goals in some of my things, and then let me project myself as someone who perhaps is actually inclusive or advocating for some equality. But when you enter into the business, the real issue, the framework of operation, their culture does not really depict or project those messages. I want to touch base on Nkumbi quickly. What symptoms do we often seem to be discussing as entrepreneurs, perhaps in your work and in your engagement so far with entrepreneurs, that perhaps they are not really going deeper enough to the underlying issues that would actually build a holistic organization that stands to advocate in a certain sense for an equal, whether pay, whether policies, whether, most of the issues on inclusion and representation, as Lungi said.
Yeah, so I fully agree with Lungi, as I was saying earlier, that it needs to be core in the strategy that you're building. It needs to be part of the DNA and the culture that you want to build. And what the symptoms that Nicodemus was talking to is there's become a lot of stuff around we're not paid enough, there's discrimination amongst all of us. So those things are they are at a high level, they become a reality because somebody is complaining about it. But when you think about it, if they were part of the business strategy, they would not even be happening. The fact that it's 2022 and we're having this conversation, that for me is an issue. But we can't shy away from it because it's our reality. And the question becomes, as individuals in our small spaces, what are we doing? And I get myself very hyped up because I look at it and I say, some of the CEOs are males who have daughters, who have wives, but these conversations are not integral to who they are. It's still okay to treat somebody differently because they're different from you, whether sexually or whatever. Like, how is that okay? Just from a humanity perspective. It's 2022.
It's 2022 and we still find ourselves having these issues. How do we solve them then? How do we begin to, it's very difficult. Well, it's sitting in my place to go somewhere and say that, hey guys, you are driving a wonderful business, but then your top level management are all males, for instance. You don't have representation. You are not working the way you should actually work to give an equal playing field for everybody. Should we walk to them directly, or should we begin to intensify some form of advocacy? Because we see a lot of advocacies around. We see a lot of programs, as Nicodemus alluded to, for women, farmers, and girl child education. There are a lot of programs around. Why is the programs not garnering or reaching the results that we want? I'll touch base quickly with Tumi on that. Why is the programs not getting the results that we want? Why? What's the problem? Is it an issue of culture that we are so, there's no dynamics with the change, or there's some selfish ambition somewhere? I don't know. Why are the programs not reaching the results?
Andrews, I'd like to agree on your second point that there is some selfish ambition. I think it is very important when we do have these advocacy programs that we constantly go to the purpose of why we even come up with these advocacy programs. And we look at who is the target, who are we trying to reach? And when we answer the question of who we're trying to reach, that's when we look at the people or the beneficiaries as a diverse society. That is where we see that we are coming up with programs that are there to address inequalities for disabled or differently abled for people, Black or white, males or females. And then we then go into how do we then bring about value. So what then drives the main mission of our advocacy programs is to bring value to what we are doing instead of chasing whether the big budget to carry out the program. So even as we implement the program, who are the implementers of the program? Is it inclusive? Is it representative of everybody that we're going to serve within the program in itself? So to me, it really talks to connection to purpose. Because if that drives you throughout your design of the programs, execution of the programs, when we get to the end and we measure the impact, it would be holistic and would make sure that we do include, we do bridge the gap of inequality. And we make sure that not only do we raise awareness, what is the action thereafter? Because it's all well and good to bring about this awareness and the advocacy. How do we all consciously then act and behave in a manner that talks to the solution? So in your own little corner, as somebody who this awareness has been brought into, what are you going to do differently? So I can sit here in this forum and discuss gender inequality, but how do I in my day-to-day practice, my entrepreneurial practices within my business, show behavior change in what we are trying to address? So whether it is in a boardroom where you're sitting with corporates who are designing a product, for instance, for a Black consumer market, and not find it important that I have a moral obligation to make sure that we are represented in something that is meant for us. You know, that's just my view to say I'd agree that there's a selfishness in these programs, and that is why they're not as impactful, and we do not see the change because it's just merely self-serving, and also beyond the awareness and the advocacy, where is the action where we choose to do differently? Thanks.
Wonderful. So the underlying issue that actually brings about the selfish side of things, or they perhaps are unconscious of those issues. Maybe selfish may be too much of a hard word, but then is the reality. There are some selfish ambitions somewhere. We all are a bit selfish in our ways, a bit in certain ways, but then there are some biases that are unforgivable. Primarily when you are serving a product, when you're distributing a service, and then you have some biases towards a certain select group of persons. How do we then begin to integrate the mindset of purpose? You know, that businesses should be purpose-driven than profit, so that the issue of equality would be seen from the get-go. I'd go to Lungi because your work from driving purpose-driven brands, in terms of their brand communication, those underlying issue before they even serve their product, the communications side of things even shows that perhaps the organization is not so intentional about solving certain inequality issues. And then also it comes to the issue about perhaps the gig economy, for an instance, where you are developing products, you're working with people, but then there are some products that just don't work in a certain environment, or people can't easily interact with them. Those issues also come. Is it that we sit back and ask ourselves that why do we do what we do? Is it that time that most founders must ask themselves, why do we do why are we serving this product? Is it to make money? If it's to make money, there's a cycle that maybe your money would eventually not come, because people are now being driven to purpose-driven brands. There's those chains that people want to see that it's not always about money. So from your angle, from your work also, how do we begin to integrate this? Because it's very difficult talking about this thing and not doing it. Sometimes you do it, but you also not talk about it. So how do we create those balance?
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrews. I think working with social purpose brands, right, it's about how do we leverage the power of brand for impact, be it economic, social, or environmental. But here's the thing, I think, with brands is that you realize this is a vehicle for you to unite people on a shared ideal at the end of the day. It's not about the gimmicks and the pretty adverts and all of that, but how are you really carrying an ideal that is going to unite people and serve people on a bigger level. But I think what I've really seen, and just to touch a little bit on some of Dumi's comments around advocacy, is that we need to take it all the way back to the thinking and the design of programs, whether it's an initiative, a service, or a product. Because once you are only looking at it from a comms point of view, you run the risk of doing what we call purpose washing, where you are sort of talking the talk, but when it comes down to the practical benefits and the actual impacts, things are not aligning. There's a bit of a dissonance in what you are delivering as a brand. And what I've seen is that we need to actually have a conversation around culture for the most part, because culture is what shifts behavior. And if we are talking about social purpose brands, a lot of this is about how are we challenging and changing people's behaviors so that a lot of these issues that we are tackling in society, whether it's gender inequality, whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's inclusive products in terms of disability, if we are going to turn the needle on that, it's a culture conversation, because culture ultimately is about what are we doing as a people before we are a business? What are we doing as a leadership before we are executives? What are we doing as a company, as a corporate citizen before we are a business? And I think this is exactly where the conversation and the approach of social business comes in, which is essentially what this community is about, adopting that shared value mindset, right? That if as a brand, you're not just looking at the experience, but you're really taking it down to what is our culture from design, from supply chain, right through to marketing, right through how we are delivering the experience. That is where we're going to shift the needle. So culture is what needs to propel purpose, essentially. It can't be that we just speak purpose, but culture-wise, we are not embedding that into who and what we are as businesses and as entrepreneurs.
Going to Nicodemus, I mean, those are brilliant thoughts, and it's just hits to bring those balance. I mean, that you talk and then you do. A culture shifts the behavior eventually, not just being an executive, but being a leader in shaping behavior and changing mindsets. In your work, and as you actually rightly said, that, I mean, sometimes are being tackled and all that. What do you think we should do from your perspective to also drive that behavior change, in addition to Lungi's thoughts and reflections there?
Thanks, Andrews. So if you think about the definition of systems change, right? It is shifting the conditions that continue to hold the problem in place, right? And I think that is the best definition that works, that I've read so far, that works for me, or that makes more sense. And so for me, one of the biggest things that ought to be done more often is having conversations that matter, conversations that are very hard, in the sense that, for example, as I said earlier, so many programs are in agriculture industry, in the food industry, that are geared, for instance, towards bringing or uplifting women to a place that is seen to be as equal as men, right? So for an example I can give is, for so many companies have come up with, like, what we do is that we give access to markets. What we do is that we give access to credit, right? And I think with like a simple Google search, we can find so many of this. So then the question is, on one hand, we are trying to empower women as though they are the victim, as though they are unable to do some of the things that, they can or they should be doing. So we're painting women as a victim. And of course, now these companies come in as the saviors of the day, right? As the well, we empower women, and of course they narrate so many amazing stories around this. So what does this do? It works for some time, and there's a level also if you are to do the monitoring and evaluation, there is some level of impact. But again, as I said, it's not to where we wish to be as a society, as a people, as a humanity. So then the question becomes, what are we really trying to achieve by, say, for instance, giving access to markets of credit? We are trying to further the agenda of the capitalist expansion, the capitalist agenda, right? And so if you look at capitalism in and of itself, who drives capitalism around the world? Who are the key drivers, or who are the key owners of power in terms of capitalism, whether it's land or all kinds of resources? Again, it's men, right? So that now at the end of the day, all these band-aid kind of interventions go back to furthering the agenda of men. You get? So in other words, we are kind of in a vicious circle, right? So until we ask ourselves, all right, so then how do we break that ceiling? How do we make an impactful change, right? And the question, in answering this question, it has to be seen from the point of there are deliberate barriers in place that continue to hold that, level or that status as it is, right? And until we're able to have conversations around, we need to consciously ask the tough questions, and we need to answer these tough questions. And in answering these tough questions, we see women not just as victims, we see women as people who are doing their level best, doing the best that they can with what they have, but they are deliberately being held at a certain level, So until we're able to have these very tough conversations, I think for the most part, we shall be in this kind of band-aid, in this kind of scenario where
cycle.
We are seen to be doing things, but they are not enough. Lastly, I think it's also important, and just borrowing from what Lungi said, to look within, and I'm borrowing also from what Shakul said, look within in terms of, okay, fine, if you are not in the position that you are in, if in a scenario where scenarios were switched, or rather situations were switched, how do you feel? How do you want to be? How do you want to be, be treated or related with, right? If I was blind, I have to ask myself, would I be, how else would I be able to interact with the world? So until we are able to put ourselves in the shoes of some of these scenarios we're trying to design changes for, until we're able to kind of be in the midst of interacting with these challenges, then it's still going to be very hard to achieve the goals that we have in mind, or the desires that we have in mind, be it in representation, be it in even in the food industry, be it in trying to elevate or create scenarios of equal opportunity.
Wonderful. Our time is not on our side at all. We are far behind in time. However, I want to quickly encourage our audience that this conversation, we don't just have this conversation and then that is it. This conversation is supposed to trickle down to our business settings, to our daily lives. We have to continue to further on, continue to talk about it, continue to express ourselves that, hey, we need to create that equal playing field. We need to bring that balance into our place of work, into our engagement, the design, the strategies, our communication, underlining issues. Those internal frameworks have to be set such a way that we can employ on the basis of ability, competence, give representation, not just on the biases or that, hey, I'm more comfortable working with women, I'm more comfortable working with men. All those things have to be changed, but it starts somewhere, as our panelists have said, it starts with you being the leader. And so with that said, Vuyo has shared a message on the chat box about our Purpose Play training for 2023, Purpose Play Playbook training for 2023. I encourage you to register for it. and then GemiTrade, sign up, register for updates, day-to-day updates of what we are doing, cross-border trade in the community platform, to be a part of the conversation on building a one single market, one digital single market economy of Africa that we can be able to trade among ourselves. Is very, very important. Final thoughts before we call it a day. Where are we going? How should we get there? Tumi, let me start with you. Oh, Tumi just dropped off. Okay, so let me start with Tumi. Okay, yeah, you're here. So where are we going? How should we get there? Under 2 minutes, and then we close off.
Okay, so I think we all have an individual responsibility in everything that we do to ensure that we always look at what we are doing holistically. Who are we serving? Who are we including? Who are we excluding? And how can we bring everybody along? If it means we need to slow down just so we can all work together, then let it be so. So as an individual, I'm prepared to say, if I really want to take everybody along in an inclusive way, I need to sometimes find it within myself, in my business, in my day-to-day life, to sometimes slow down and wait for others so that I can bring more people along to achieve a bigger impact.
Wonderful. Quickly, Lungi.
Thanks, Andrews. Yeah, I think on really just a final note, just to echo Jimmy's sentiments, we will go way further if we're going together. So I think for me, for brands, it doesn't matter what industry, what sector you're in, collaboration is really the way. And I think in terms of gender equality and representation at large, it's really about being interdisciplinary, having an openness to not just only working and focusing on your niche or your industry, but understanding how these things ultimately start to feed into one another across different sectors. So having an interdisciplinary approach, I think that's key. Definitely having a collaborative mindset is key. And I can't stress to say, look, you have to adopt that shared value mindset. I think whatever business you're in, given the times that we are in, we are all actually social businesses, whether we admit it or not, because there are way too many challenges in our societies for us to not be paying attention to that, or for us to not be looking at solutions to address those.
Wonderful. Nicodemus, carry us home. What's the final thoughts from you also?
Thank you so much, Andrews. When I look at the innovation scene in Africa, or the entrepreneurship scene in Africa, it's amazing and it's vibrant. And there's constant, there's a sense in which our young people are innovating to solve for all our challenges, be it in food, in health, in transportation, in all kinds of industries, right? So what I can say really is all these young companies, if they can adopt the idea, and this is where I'm bouncing off Lungi, if they can adopt the idea of shared value, because shared value to me is, the way I define it is, if I'm trying to get from point A to Z, shared value is a framework that is both good for society and is good for my business, right? So in a sense, it covers all that I need for my business to grow, but also, to positively bring change to my society. So let's adopt the idea of shared value and what the potential it has for the entrepreneurship scene in the continent. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We wrap up with Mpumi, your final thoughts, should I say, a clarion call, perhaps, for all of us here on this platform to be conscious and perhaps also adopting a shared value thinking and philosophy in our approach.
Yeah, thanks, Andrews, for the conversation. I think the biggest thing for me is let's embrace diverse thoughts. Let's embrace that we are diverse people. Let's embrace that we've got diverse perspectives. And if we can do that, that will also help us to actually move forward, because that collaboration, that product that you're bringing into the market, that change that you need to do from a mindset perspective, the diversity actually helps you to take you a step further. And let's not pay lip service to some of these conversations.
Yeah.
What are the things that we are doing in our own spaces that's really contributing to this change? And when you're embracing other people, other religions, other cultures, other whatevers you want to describe them, that's where the change happens. And I think we should do that.
Wonderful. Diversity is beauty. Diversity is what actually drives the change that we want. We cannot build alone. We cannot do it alone. You need to involve minds. And what beautiful way to actually involve mind through purposeful thinking and shared value thinking. That businesses do not stand alone. They must work in consonance, in agreement with societal values. You know, it's economic value marrying with social value. So when you drive economic gain, you add up for social gain. You cannot do it alone unless you involve everyone, unless you have everyone being involved with your business, with your core operation. It starts with you, not just lip service, as our panelists have said. It starts with your day-to-day activity, or your contributions, your participation. And then also it goes down to your daily walks of life, your activities, your conversations that you have daily. All these things are the tenets and the little nuggets that fold or come together to drive the change that we want to actually experience on our continent. I want to say thank you so much for staying with us, for having this conversation with us. Believe you me, that our entrepreneurs are inspired just as I am. I can sense it right here in Accra, that minds have been shifted, purposes have been broadened, and then strategies perhaps are being adopted through our conversation to actually chart the path and walk the talk. Thank you all for making this an insightful, yet again, an insightful conversation. It's the fourth installment. We couldn't have done it any better without you, and amazing contributions also. I want to also extend the thanks to our audience, our participants who have stayed with us till this end. I want to say thank you so much. We would definitely meet again in 2023. We'll continue the conversation on economic growth and the entrepreneur. We did today's edition on an emphasis on gender equality and inclusion, adding on to diversity, bringing in the balance with our potentials. Actually, that hey, it's a male and female, and it's an equal representation world that we ought to drive the change that we want to see. Actually, when we include everybody, we will see the change. When we have equal representation, we will actually see the change that we want. Thank you. Without much ado, I want to say see you again and have a wonderful end of year, wonderful festivity. If you'll be celebrating wherever you find yourself in the world, I want to wish you well, stay safe, and let's meet again in hopefully February, March, January, let's just meet again. Stay connected with Shared Value Africa Initiative across all social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and connect with Jamie Trade to keep updated with all the information. And also join us for our Purpose Playbook training. Can't emphasize this enough. If you want to actually drive a purposeful organization, start with the Purpose Playbook training. Start there. I have a lot of testimonies to share, but join us again. We'll have an insightful conversation just as you have. All the best. Love you all. Bye.